Welcome to the Brave Woman Podcast. I'm your host, Tanya Lynn, founder of Sistership Circle and author of Open Your Heart and The Art of Leading Circle. I'm the mother of 2 girls, an 8 on the Enneagram, aka the Challenger, happily married to my business partner, Brent, love connecting with nature, and have put in well over 10,000 hours circling with other women. On this podcast, we will explore how to embody the brave woman so that you can take action on your dreams and desires, unapologetically speak your truth, and live life on your own terms. Grab a seat and a cup of tea, and let's get started. For the past 8 weeks, we have been diving into the heroine's journey. And I am so excited to shift into the next and final section of this journey that we've been on. And this is the embodiments part. We've done the work of going deep and looking at the wounded feminine. We rebirthed ourselves. We reconnected with the masculine. And now it's about shifting into your power as a woman who is integrated, who is whole, who has done the deep dive. And over the next couple weeks, we are looking at the embodiment of your power with your voice, your pleasure, and your magic. And we could also see how these are related to the 3 different wounds of the feminine, the sister wound, the mother wound, and the witch wound. And so this is about stepping out of those old stories and stepping into the future that you want to create for yourself. And having this be in the body, it's who you are. It's the full expression of you. And so that's a really important distinction here. Is there might be women out there who you admire, who you see and you think, oh, I wish I could be like her. And you might want to emulate them or copy them or find things that you can bring into you. But the point here of the embodiment of you as the brave woman, as your authentic and powerful self, is coming from a place of what feels real for you. This is about finding and expressing your truth, your magic, not compared to anyone else, not trying to be like anyone else, because you have your unique blueprint. You were brought to this planet for a reason with your unique gifts, the things that you've cultivated throughout the years. And really, it's looking at your own heroine's journey of what you have personally gone through and making that mess your message. A lot of times we want to just put the past in the past and, okay, I've gone through this journey, I'm good now. I don't need to revisit that. I don't need to rehash the past. This is about integration. Embodiment is the living, breathing part of you. And it's not about discarding or dismissing the past, but about really finding the truth throughout all of these stories, like really getting the medicine from your journey, cultivating these parts of you, right? And bringing them into the light. This can be so challenging. And yet, when you can really get that your mess is your message, and that it is what makes you uniquely you. And that vulnerable part of you is what others can then connect with. It's your humanness. In the spiritual world, we're always looking at this ascension. We're looking at, get me to the light, right? Like, I just want to ascend. But remember, we went in the descent into the dark feminine. How can you actually hold both of those? How can you hold both the ascension and the descension? How can you hold both the light and the dark? And that is this piece that's going to make you embodied. It's not trying to skip over or bypass or escape or try to get rid of these parts of you that you feel like don't serve you. No, it's about the integration of all that. So today we're going to start with voice. The power of your voice. Speaking your truth. And where we have been blocked with this is with the witch wound, with the mother wound, with the sister wound. It's the ancestral part of us, of how women were not allowed to speak their truth, how perhaps it wasn't okay to speak your truth with your mother, and how perhaps it got you into trouble with your sisters. So we want to start working on releasing that through the voice. And so the first way we can start to do that and activating the voice is through simple toning, through moving the energy, moving the sound through our body, starting to move that from the belly up through the throat, out through the mouth. And toning just sounds like ah, oh, to start to break up whatever stagnant energy might still be lingering from the old wounding. This is part of the healing process. We got to identify these stories. We got to feel these feelings. We have to go back into that. And then we actually have to break up the stagnant energy that has got stuck in our bodies, stuck in the vocal cord, in the throat chakra, in the heart, in the chest, right? Where it's got stuck. So first we have to release that through the sound of our voice. And I think one of the most powerful ways to reconnect with your voice and feel the power of your voice is through song. And this might feel a little bit edgy because many of us feel like, oh, I don't have a good voice. Oh, I don't really know how to sing. Oh, I've not been formally trained. Or maybe you have and you're a couple steps ahead. But for me, for example, I can feel a little bit shy and timid around singing. I don't know how to sing. That's my old story, right? But when we can just find a song that we love, and maybe it's a circle song, maybe it's a song on the radio, and we can just belt it out in the car, in the shower, as if no one else is listening, and reconnect with the power of your voice. And then maybe it sounds like you're sitting outside and you just allow whatever sound wants to come through you, to start to play with different notes, to play with different emotions and see how they would sound. And allow the music to move you. Allow it to inspire you to start speaking. So when it comes to speaking your truth, what I mean by this is having the difficult, challenging conversations, setting healthy boundaries for yourself. And you got to do that through speaking. Asking for what it is that you want and need, and sharing your personal vision and mission with the world, which essentially is your why, your mission, your message, the thing that you're here to bring, your gifts. So let's start with the first one, which is having the difficult conversations. This can feel really confronting because we may have been in trouble for speaking our truth in this way. We may be afraid of conflict and not want to be confrontational. There's a lot of different reasons why having hard conversations might bring us anxiety, fear, doubt, right? And so sometimes it's easier to just brush things under the rug. But here's the thing. You're a brave woman. And being a brave woman means having real and authentic relationships. And you can't have real and authentic relationships without sometimes having the difficult conversations. It's these difficult conversations where perhaps you've been triggered or someone did something that perhaps didn't feel aligned with you, or you have to ask someone for something. This is where we can really start to create the intimacy. It's vulnerable. But this is where we get to clear the air, not hold resentment and judgment in our relationships, and to create honesty, radical honesty. I asked my husband a few months ago, on a scale of 1 to 10, how honest do you feel like our relationship is? And he said, yeah, at least a 9. And I said, yeah, I feel the same way. We hold nothing back from each other. There's no secrets. We have created a safe and sacred container that we can have hard conversations with one another. And this is a practice. So the practice here is to look at, make a list, get out a piece of paper and write down who are the people who you're withholding something from. Perhaps you have a judgment. Perhaps you're withholding love. Perhaps you have been triggered. You're holding something back from. And also make a list of everyone who you have either cut off or who has cut you off, who it was a meaningful relationship. You know, like you had a relationship, you had a friendship, partnership, and it got severed. Write all those people down. And then write down a list of anyone you're out of integrity with. And what I mean by out of integrity is maybe you owe them money. Maybe they owe you money. Maybe you didn't tell them the truth. Maybe you aren't totally being yourself with. That's a big piece. And so you have these 3 different columns of people. And just be with that list. Are you being a brave woman in your relationships by looking at this list? Are you speaking your truth? Are you using your voice? Or are you scared of being real, of being intimate? Are you scared of what they'll think? This is a great place to start in speaking your truth, of having hard conversations. So I want to give you a little guide here on how to have these difficult conversations. And in Sistership Circle, we have something called the Withhold Tool, where we create the space for people to share anything that's bothering them, triggering them, any judgments they have, anything that's coming up in the space, so that we can have a clear and safe space. It's all these little places where we need to repair our relationships, repair the circle. And I think that this is one of the most powerful tools, but I got to tell you, it brings things up because we have to have these hard conversations. And for those who are not comfortable, don't want to be confrontational, it can be really, really confronting. I remember a sister who said to me once in kind of a direct way, and I wasn't really expecting it, of like, I was really upset by an interaction that we had. And it took me aback, and I wish that we had set it up. And so we'll talk about this in a second, setting up the conversation. But I so appreciated her not holding anything back. And I knew in that moment that I can rely on her to tell me the truth. I can rely on her to show up and be honest with me. I knew I could go to her and get real feedback and that she wouldn't lie to me. I value that so much. So the first thing you want to do is you want to ask for a time. You don't want to just walk up to someone and bombard them with this difficult conversation. You want to make sure that both people are prepared for it. So asking them for a time and, tell them this is something that's meaningful for me. It's, I want to share something that's on my heart with you. Don't worry, you're not in trouble. And that is a really big piece here, especially with a partner, is you don't want them to be all freaking out, anxious, and they have their guard up with you. So letting someone know that they're not in trouble, or, this isn't like a bad thing. It's just, I want to have a real conversation and share something that's on my heart with you. But letting them know what it's about without really going into it, so that they can be prepared and come in open to the conversation. So that's the first thing. Asking for the time. They're not in trouble. Come relax, come open. Then when you're sitting down, you want to make sure that they're open. I want to share something with you. Feels very vulnerable for me. So letting them know that there's some vulnerability here, that this is uncomfortable, that this is hard for you to talk about, and just making sure that they're open. Are you open to, me sharing something that feels a little bit difficult for me to share with you? Okay. The more soft you can be and the more heart open you can be, they're going to mirror that back. If you come in with your dukes up, or, like hard or harsh, the guard's going to be up. So it's about having their guard be down when you're coming in. The next piece is to make sure that you're using I language, and especially I feel. Nonviolent communication is a very, very powerful tool to use here. And we're going to have a link to that in our show notes so that you can actually go and see some really great pieces from nonviolent communication. But you want to take responsibility and make sure that you're not blaming with you. You did this. You said this. It's more of, here was my experience and here's how I'm feeling. And again, it's about the vulnerability. One way that I like to bring forth my vulnerability and take full responsibility is by actually speaking into where I'm fully responsible, but also to share what this is bringing up for me from my past. So the other day when we were talking, and I noticed that you were on your phone. So the notice is part of the nonviolent communication. I felt really unimportant, and I felt ignored, and I felt really sad. And what this reminded me of. So here's what's so powerful about this is it's actually taking it off of them and into your experience, right? Because what you're sharing here is that they triggered you by looking at their phone, but it wasn't really about them. This is about you, right? This is your experience. So it reminded me of when I was growing up, and my dad would always be reading the paper when I would try to have a conversation with him. And, you know, I just, I wanted to share this with you. And I also have a request, right? So it's, I notice, I feel, I imagine that you're really busy. Maybe you can get into their shoes. That's another important piece here, is getting into their shoes. And then maybe there's a request that, hey, I have a request that when we get together, put our phones down, we put them off, we put them away so that we could just be fully present with each other. And I'm open to, you know, like discussing what that can look like and having it work for both of us. So you could see through that conversation that I was really taking responsibility, but I was also asking for what I need, which was the request. And this is such a powerful way of really claiming and owning the power of your voice, that you get to say how this goes. You get to make these requests. You get to create your relationships. You're not at, you're not the victim of the relationship. You're not just bystander who's just, passively in this relationship. No, like you're an active participant responsible for this relationship and for it looking the way that you want it to look. And now you let them respond. You let them meet you in that. Now, here's the thing. In our relationships, we want to create partnership. We want it to be a co-creation. We want to be open. So you've spoken, now allowing them to speak with yourself open to receiving whatever it is. And maybe they have a counter to your request. Maybe they are a no to your request. Get curious. Get into their world. That's what's going to have you come up with a solution. And maybe if they say no, say, okay, well, how can we find alignment here? How can we create a solution that's a win-win and where we both feel seen and heard and loved and all of that, right? So what you want to make sure is that you're centered, you're open, and you're not attached. You're committed to the love and the connection in this relationship, but you're not attached to an outcome of what exactly it needs to look like, right? You've made a request, but you're open to being in the flow of the co-creation that this relationship is. You're not trying to prove yourself. You're not trying to be right. You're not trying to make them wrong. And that takes something to be able to speak your truth without blame, shame, guilting, or a right or wrong paradigm. This is the power of your voice, is the ownership of your own experience and communicating that. To become a masterful communicator in the new paradigm requires a level of openness and a level of self-awareness where you can show up fully owning your stories, your projections, your judgments, your triggers, like they're yours. This person here is just doing them, right? And for you to have a working relationship, you've got to ask for what it is that you want and need, making your requests, speaking up when it's uncomfortable because it's not quite aligning or it's feeling like something's, there's a butting of heads here. How do we come back into affinity? How do we come back into alignment with one another? Can you hold that as the vision of you speaking your truth? Is alignment. Not a right or wrong, but an alignment, a syncing up, a being met, and that both people's needs are met. So having hard conversations is what will create fulfilling relationships in your life. And also paying attention to, and this is something that I, am constantly dealing with in my partnership with my husband, is not over processing. And I think where we get into over processing is where we want the other person to hear us, and we are looking for some kind of validation that we're right. That is when we go into this over processing, because it becomes this back and forth of both people wanting to be heard and neither person really hearing the other, and not actually in this place of each person taking 100% responsibility and speaking from their truth and not their story. So the next part of using the power of our voice is in setting healthy boundaries. And this feels like the thing that I've been working on all year. If I could say there's a theme for this year, it's been boundaries. It feels like it's come up over and over and over again. And I noticed that a lot of my anger and resentment comes from not setting healthy boundaries. I wobble and I don't speak them. And then I don't hold them. So the power of your voice, of do you mean what you say? When you speak a boundary, that you're holding it with your voice. Energetically, you can feel the no or the boundary, but it's not a barrier. In other words, there's no, your dukes aren't up, your nails aren't out, right? Like there's an openness, there's an availability, but there's also the clear boundary of where you stand. And this can feel so challenging. And it has been so challenging. And I'm understanding that boundaries are all around speaking the expectations up front, setting the container of what the container looks like. It's essentially the agreements of how we're going to show up with one another. And they are an invitation for connection. They're an invitation for love and intimacy. But there's this clarity on where that lies. Now, the thing we have a problem with boundaries is we want flexibility. We want to go with the flow. We want to be able to have choice. And so boundaries can be negotiable. Again, the power of your voice here. You might find that, okay, I had this boundary here, and now you're at that boundary. And yes, it feels okay for you to come a little bit closer. An exercise that we just did in somatic experiencing is we had our partner stand about 10 feet away. And we practice with the boundary and noticing the boundary by having this person keep taking steps closer and energetically feeling in our body how we felt and being able to say stop and proceed and be able to actually command how close they were going to get. And it was so powerful because it was consent. It was really playing with and knowing that this person is going to honor these boundaries. And that might be the challenge, is where there's been a boundary rupture in the past. We don't trust that those people in the present will be able to honor our boundaries because they were stepped on in the past. So for us to have that awareness of where we don't trust others to hold and to respect our boundaries. And so that might be a conversation to have, right? One of the things that you might want to do, and this is another thing we did with somatic experiencing, or I did, is our bodies can't tell the difference between real life and our imagination. Your nervous system can respond the same to a real threat as to an imaginary threat. Now, what's so powerful about this is that we can heal through the imagination. And sometimes to be able to set energetic boundaries with people who have been crossing our boundaries, we can imagine locking them up. Now you might be thinking, well, why would I want to do that? Because it feels really good. So I had someone who was really upsetting me, crossing my boundaries, and I wasn't actually communicating those boundaries clearly. I was bending them. I was making exceptions. I was constantly breaking my own boundaries. And I did not trust that this person would honor and respect them. And it was making me angry and resentful. And honestly, like I felt like I couldn't even have a conversation with this person. And so what I did is I put them in an imaginary chair. This is all in my imagination. Put them in a chair, stick their feet in cement and dry it, tie them up, and put duct tape on their mouth. And because it's in my imagination, I know that they are safe in the real world. There's nothing bad going to happen to them. But it allowed me to feel safe, knowing they weren't going to talk back. They weren't going to hurt me. They weren't going to run away. That I can speak my truth and say everything that I needed to say to this person without feeling like I was going to be threatened or pushed over or anything. They could actually hear me. And so what I noticed is that when they were sitting there across from me, without being able to speak, without being able to move, and I could just speak freely, I found the power of my voice. But not only that, I felt my nervous system settle, relax, and I was able to come to a place of love and compassion for them. I was no longer angry or resentful. Now, what's so cool is this person, the next time I saw them, was so open, and we had such a beautiful connection. I didn't even need to go into any of that with them. Now, I could have, right? And I felt actually empowered to be able to go into that. But I had no charge with this person anymore. And I was able to just be myself, which was part of my problem, is I didn't feel safe enough to be myself with them. And we just had this lovely connection. So this can be such a powerful tool, using your imagination before you actually have a conversation or before you set a boundary with someone, and to then be able to walk in there and release a lot of that charge that's being held in the nervous system. So here's some of the things around setting boundaries is, number one, you don't need to explain yourself when setting a boundary. You could just let someone know that I don't like to be touched. Please ask me before you give a hug. Or another one is, I'm not open to feedback. This is a huge one in partnerships, right? Where our partner's constantly trying to fix us, or your mother, is to set that boundary and to speak up and to say, you know, when I'm sharing, I would love for you to ask before you give me feedback. Now, here's the thing about boundaries is sometimes, as with children, they're going to push the boundary. They're going to actually want to see if you're real. They're going to test it, right? So you're going to have to remind people, and perhaps it's your mother, and every time you have a conversation, you might need to start the conversation, creating the context, creating the container for yourself of, okay, I want to share something with you, and I want to let you know that I'm not open to any feedback. Okay. So if you have some feedback for me, you want to give me some advice, I'm going to ask that you ask me permission when I'm done, and I'll let you know at that point if I'm open to it. But in this moment, while I'm speaking, I'm not actually open. Get their consent, get their agreement, right? So when we set these, this is an agreement, right? Get their agreement. Have them say yes. Okay, got it. So this could be around touch. This could be around feedback. This can be, I mean, all kinds of, there's so many boundaries that we could be setting. Personal space, time by yourself, when you're on a call, that no one enters the room. Are you putting a sign on the door? Are you having the conversation? And then you got to hold it, holding the boundary. Now, there's two ways to hold the boundary. The first one is energetically, that you are unmessable with, that this is not a negotiable thing, that you're not available. Energetically, you're holding your boundary. And then the other way is with the voice, right? Because people can feel the boundary. And then the voice is the communication of that boundary. So those are the two very important parts of holding the boundary. And they are allowed to be upset. They're allowed to throw a tantrum. They're allowed to cry. They're allowed to be angry. And how you want to respond to this is, I understand that you're disappointed, and that's okay. I love you. Acknowledging their feelings, allowing their feelings. And this is the really big work for us to do, is to not get triggered by whatever their reaction is. And that is where we have to step into being the brave woman and continue to use the power of our voice and speaking into what they're feeling and letting them know that's okay and that you're still holding the boundary. Okay, so now let's move into making an ask. Asking for what you want, asking for what you need, and making what's called unreasonable requests. This is something I've learned at Landmark Education that has stuck with me, oh God, since 2005. It's been almost 20 years. And it was one of the most powerful distinctions I learned at Landmark, is making these unreasonable requests. And the unreasonable request is that there's no reason, like most likely they would say no. Like the reasonable, rational, logical mind would probably say no, but it's a big, bold ask. So this is asking for favors. This is making unreasonable, uncomfortable requests of people. But I'll tell you what, when you make these unreasonable asks and people get to actually step up to meet them, some people are so turned on by the contribution that they get to make or the challenge that it brings them. I love unreasonable requests made of me because I get to be challenged and I love to be challenged. So it's when you know that it might be an inconvenience and you're asking anyway. And the important piece here is to acknowledge the inconvenience that it might be, the impact that it may have, but also the reward, what's on the other side of it. So here's the thing about asking for what you want and need. Number one is your needs and your desires are not anyone else's responsibility to meet. They're your needs and your desires. You can make a request for someone to meet your need or desire, but it's not their responsibility to meet it. We are constantly putting this on our partners, just as we constantly put our needs on our mothers to take care of us. But this is what it means to come into being a spiritual adult, a feminine leader, a brave woman, is to own that you are responsible for meeting your own needs. And how that might look is asking for someone to meet the need, but it's not on them. And this is the difference between being powerful and being needy. You can feel the difference when someone's coming to you and they want you to rescue them, or they want you to fix them or save them in some way, and they feel really needy. You don't want to help them. It feels gross, right? Same here. Be responsible for yourself and make these requests coming from that place of power. And then people will meet them. It's because of that paradigm around the neediness that sometimes we feel like it's going to be a burden or an inconvenience, or, we feel a little bit guilty about making a request, right? But when we come from this place of empowerment of I'm responsible for myself and my own needs, and I can make a request and they could say yes or no, and either way is fine. I'm not attached because someone else might be able to help me with this need, or this person might have someone else who can help me with my need. The other important piece here with making requests of people is the two parts to the request. The first one is the very specific thing that you need, and then the due date. So, very easy example to your partner. Honey, can you please take out the trash? And by the trash, I mean all of the bathrooms, the office, the bedrooms, the kitchen, all the different trash cans. And can you do that by 6 a.m. tomorrow when the trash man comes? Specific. So here's what's so powerful about this, is that you're setting them up to win. If you want people to respond to your needs, to respond to your desires, to respond to your requests, are you setting them up to win, or are you setting them up to lose? I want my people to win, because then they'll help me again, right? So we want to think about, what is the request really? What's the specifics of the request? Can I actually take the time to prepare my request? And I am constantly messing up on this one. This is a work in progress. And we learn through our mistakes here. We learn every time that we get it wrong. We learn what needs to be put in next time, right? Okay, and the last piece here is around really speaking our message, bringing our gifts to the world, essentially the voice of our personal vision and mission. I have found from coaching so many women in leadership and coaching women to put their message out there, to speak about their circles, to put their business out there on social media, there's such a fear around using our voice and being visible. We're afraid of what people are going to think. We're afraid of being ignored. We're afraid of being judged. We're afraid of being burned at the stake. I've felt witch hunted many times by, different people online because I triggered them in some way. And especially during my events, sometimes when you take the stage, people aren't going to resonate with you. They're not going to agree with you. They're not going to like your message, and you might trigger them. I found that when I'm really connected with my truth, it can be polarizing. And this has been really, really hard because of my sister wound of wanting everyone to love me and wanting to be connected to everyone. But the truth of the matter is, I can't please everyone. But I am committed to my vision and my mission. And one of the things that's been critical for me is connecting with my why I do what I do, and sharing that authentic story, sharing my passion, speaking from that place of where I am lit up. That's the authentic voice that comes out. And that's the voice that people connect with. It's also been really critical for me in really knowing and living my values. Not only my personal values, but the values in which we stand for at Sistership Circle. Can I be the example for that? And so when I'm connected with my values, that just shines through, that comes through, and I feel connected with my truth. So sometimes the truth is the story. It's the inspiring story of our why, right? That's who I am. That's my life journey. That's my experience. But I want to be careful that I'm not projecting that story. And what I mean by that is the sad story, the disempowered story of where I am a victim, or I'm needing to prove myself. That's ego. That's not actually the authentic self. So when our authentic self could come out through our voice, and we're living and breathing that, again, this embodiment piece, we just have to trust that it's getting to the exact right people who need to hear your message, who are aligned with your vision, and who are inspired by your mission. So, sister, are you ready to go out there and use the power of your voice? There's the power of the pen. There's the power of your voice. And next up, bringing it together with the power of your voice is the power of your pleasure. So I look forward to continuing on this journey with you, where we get to embody our power as the brave woman. And I will see you next week.
You just listened to this show. I'd love for you to leave the Brave Woman podcast an honest review. Reviews help podcasts like this one grow, making it more possible for me to devote my time, energy, and money to its production. If you take a screenshot of your review and email it to support@sistershipcircle.com, we'll send you one of our archetype activations as a thank you gift. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Up next, in the next episode, you're going to feel the power of your pleasure. If you're ready to love your body temple and create a more sensual experience for yourself in the world, tune into the next episode on the Brave Woman Podcast.